learn how to make this into this. Alright, so I have this picture of Neymar here, and so the first thing I like to do is already pre-cut just to make things a little faster. I'm going to go to Camera Raw Filter, and so editing in Camera Raw Filter really depends on the picture, so I always turn up the contrast just to give it a little bit more contrast between the highlights and shadows. And so for this one, I might bring down the exposure too, just because when you leave the exposure up, his hair is like white, which you don't want. You want to try to get as much detail out of the image as you can. So I'm also going to bring the highlights down. I usually bring the shadows up a bit. It depends. Yeah, we're going to bring them up slightly. The whites, again, slightly. Whites are very similar. Whites and blacks are very similar to highlights and shadows. But one thing I always do is bring up texture to around, usually do between like 30 and 50-ish, whatever looks good without messing it up too much. And if you can like really see, you can start to see some reds and greens come in. So what we will do for that, I'll show you in a minute, but we're gonna bring up the clarity just a couple. And then I always turn up sharpening quite a bit just to, again, get that little bit of extra detail out. And then I'm gonna bring up the color noise to 100. And that gets rid of those reds and greens that were there before. It just kind of keeps everything one color. You definitely want that because it kind of makes it look sloppy and low quality if you leave that in. But probably the biggest thing that I do that you guys ask me about is with my color mixer is really changing the colors to give it, especially on the skin tone, keep all the skin tone colors the same. So for the reds, doesn't really do too much except for the Paris text, but orange, it'll get his face. So I like to make the color a little bit more red, but then yellow I turn all the way down. And so depending on what that looks like, I'll adjust this, because you don't want it too red, because faces aren't red unless you've been in the sun all day. But greens, this one is affecting his hair. So I'm going to bring it all the way to the left just because it looks more white. And same with the aquas, bring it all the way to the right just so it looks more white because that's what the actual color is. And so you need to be careful when messing with some of these just because you can completely change the color of jerseys and stuff. So here it goes from purple to blue to greenish. So I'm going to bring it to the left a little bit just because that's kind of more of the actual PSG color. It also picks up some purples, bring those over, and magentas, it gets his lips. So when I go into saturation, same sort of thing. I like to bring the oranges up just to give his skin a little more color. Same with the yellows. On this one, I'm going to bring up the reds quite a bit. I usually don't do this, but it's not really affecting his face, and it's affecting more of his lips, as you can see. And they're kind of bland there, so just add a little lip plump, if you will. Greens I'm going to bring all the way down, aquas all the way down, just to get out those extra colors in the hair. And so for blues, you can't really do a whole lot, but if you want to just adjust one color, like make it cool, like look how nice, like that looks pretty cool. But for this, I'm just going to leave it, maybe bring it up a tiny bit. Same with the purples, and then bring up the magentas because that's affecting his lip again. And so for luminance, it's literally just brightness. I'm gonna bring that up a tad. Oranges, maybe bring it down a little because we'll be touching the highlights and shadows on his face after. Same with the yellows, I kind of like where they are. But as you can see, the greens are affecting his hair up here. So I'm going to bring it up slightly just so it's more white and gets rid of the extra color. Same with the aquas. And now, so for the blues, hold up. The blues and the purples, I'm gonna bring up the purples quite a bit just because that's more of the highlights rather than the actual jersey itself. So if you look at before, this is the original image, and then now after. And so I'm just gonna click. That's step one. So you can see huge difference already. So what I like to do next is I will add a brightness and contrast layer, adjustment layer, and then I will clip it by pressing Alt and holding in between the layers, so that way anything that you brush will only affect the layer and not the background. And so I usually turn it up between 80 and 100. Again, it depends on the image, but the great thing about adjustment layers is that you can go back and check. So I'm going to put it around 90, and I'm going to press Control I while making sure I'm selected on the layer mask. And then I'm just going to zoom in, and I'm going to take a brush, make it a smaller brush. And I'm going to turn the hardness to 0, make sure it's white so you can paint on the layer mask. And I like to go over both the teeth and the eyes, the whites of the eyes. And from looking at this image, there's not too much for the eyes to do on this one. So the thing is, if you go over more than you want, just press X on the keyboard and it'll change your color to black so you can erase. Yeah, so the key has his eyes pretty much closed. So I'll do it where I see it, but again, there's not going to be a ton. So already just looking at this, the difference. This isn't necessary, it's just something I like to do. It makes it look a little cleaner. So then I do same thing with the adjustment saturation layer, clip the mask, and then invert it after I turned it down to -100, so there's no color. And this basically just gets rid of any of the extra color in the teeth. His teeth are pretty much perfect, but like we can get up here, like towards the gums where it turns kind of brown orange. Like back there, the bottom ones are a little bit orangey. This probably won't even be, you probably won't even be able to see it when you zoom out, the difference, but it's something that goes a long way. And then I also do the whites of the eyes. Both of those can go very noticeable on the right picture. Like even this one, if you look at the right eye, or I guess his left, you can see it just kind of, actually both of them, brightens them up. So that is step 2. I do the eyes and the teeth. And so for my main player treatment method, I add an exposure adjustment layer, set it to luminosity. And so for highlights, I'll turn it up to +3, around there roughly. Invert it, same as before. But so now what we're gonna do, make sure you're nice and zoomed in, have a small brush, 0 hardness, and then you're going to change the flow of the brush at the top to 10%, so that way it's not as hard on his skin. So it's basically 10% power of what the brush should be. And so I will paint over the highlights on his face. So pretty much anywhere that is light, I paint over. So like for example here, you're going to want to bring the brush down. You're not going to want to keep a big brush and just kind of just generally go over it. That's how you burn players and make them look messy. There's definitely a few Instagram users out there, I won't name names, but you know who you are, who do that, and then they have been in an oven for way too long. Anyway, we are going to continue. Some of the biggest spots to do are the top lip, the nose, the eyes. Just kind of makes it stand out a little bit more, adds some depth. And I also like to do the ears, just because the ears are basically popping out of your skull. So anything that's protruding, you should probably do, just because the whole point of this type of retouch is adding depth, making it look more 3D than it is, which gives it a realistic but also different look. I'm sure many of you have seen my work, and that's just kind of the way I do it. you got to be careful. Sometimes, even on 10% flow, it's a little too much. So you can adjust that. If it's too much, bring it down to 8, 7. That left arm one might be a little bit too much, but we'll see when we zoom out. But you really want to take your time with this. Player treatment is probably one of the most important things on a design, just because the focus of the design is the player. So here we have before, after, before, after. You can also, if you feel like it, you can do the jersey. I haven't been doing this nearly as much just because sometimes it makes it look kind of like a video game. And I've been kind of focusing on making more just like crispy, looks realistic, clean type of retouch. I'll do it on this one just to show you, because it doesn't always come out video game like, but we will see. But yeah, I'm going a little faster than I normally would just to show you guys, but you get the idea. You go over anything that's light with this one, like so. So we can see brightens up the highlights a little bit. And so now for the shadows, same thing, bring it to luminosity. But then here I turn it down to usually like -3.5, 4, somewhere around there. Invert it, and you're just gonna do the exact same thing, but with the darks of the image. So definitely like right here, under the eyes, over the eyes, next to the nose. Again, you're gonna want to keep adjusting your brush size. You can use the bracket keys on your keyboard to do that. That's how I'm adjusting so quickly here. You definitely want to utilize the shortcuts when you have them. It drastically decreases the amount of time it takes to do this. It may take you a while when you first start, but I promise you, if you practice, it really won't take that long, and it will make a huge difference in your work. So again, just going over the ears, just to get every little bit. Now we're gonna go down to the arms. So like the arms, sometimes a lot of them don't have a ton of detail, so you can kind of add in where you think. Like right here, it's kind of getting blocked by the other side of his body, so we will add in a little shadow there, because when you're on 10% flow, you have some room to mess with while keeping it realistic, just because you're barely doing anything with 10%. So sometimes I'll go over them a few times. You could just increase the flow, but it makes that a lot easier to okay, well, my mouse just died. Okay, I'm back. My mouse just died, sorry about that. But yeah, just go over the dark spots. Right here I could do a better job masking, but that's not the purpose of this. So, and then with the darks, you can go over the shadows of the jersey as well. But again, I'm not going to take too much time on this one just because I don't tend to do it anymore. It's not necessary really. It kind of gives it, like I said, more of a video game feel. But yes, so we will group that so I can show it before and after. So this is what it started as, and this is with the player retouch that I use. Now I would say it is quite good, if I do say myself, not to toot my own horn. But one more thing that I'd sometimes do at the end is I do sharpen more, up to filter, sharpen more on the original. And so for like this one it works. It's not too big of a difference. It looks a little weird when you zoom in, but when you zoom out it looks extra crispy. But sometimes it adds kind of like a crosshatch pattern to the skin. Doesn't look great unless you're going for like a comic book type vibe, which you probably aren't most of the time, so I would be careful adding that. But you can see a clear difference. The skin tones all matched up. Here you kind of have some greens, and here's like red, and then just his normal skin. But then here you kind of bring it all together, kind kind of more of an orange vibe. His hair is completely white, the blues are all together, and all of that. And one last thing I will show you. Let me just pull up this. One last thing I do at the end, usually at like the end of the entire design, is I have a separate color correct, and I add a black and white adjustment layer. I bring the reds to 40, yellows to 60, greens to 40, cyans to 60, blues to 20, and magentas to 80, and put it on soft light at 20% opacity. Kind of just brings the blacks down a little bit. And then I just put a black square on overlay, and then bring the fill down to like 13 again, just darkens the thing up a little bit, and then just do a selective color. And for this, I just bring the blacks down minus 25%, kind of ups the blacks a little bit so everything's not too dark. And then I bring on reds, I put cyans minus 22, magenta plus 8, yellow plus 7, and black plus 30. So that here you can tell it kind of brings up the black, so it's more of a dark gray. And then I group all of those together, and I put that on, that layer, that selective color layer, I put on 43% fill, and then I just group it all together so you can see it. So if we take a look at this, before, after, I would say it's quite a huge difference. And I think that doing this can add that extra little bit of pizzazz to your guys' designs, and it's just something that, like I said, goes a long way, really helps bring out the best in a design, and is 100% necessary if you want to move forward in the graphic design world. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial. I'll definitely be sure to put up more tutorials. You guys have been asking me quite a bit for the how I do things and my design process, and I finally got some motivation today to get around to a video, so I will definitely be sure to get out more. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed. Thanks for watching. Peace.